Hey everyone, I know this video is super delayed. It was supposed to come out yesterday, but my PC has been non-stop crashing while I've been trying to test and get weapons to test. So I'm really sorry about this, but hopefully it is early enough. I woke up a bit early for you guys to be able to see it and have some ample time to talk about it with your team or work on stuff before the day one is out. So let's go ahead and quickly talk about the important damage changes in the sandbox for episode Heresy that are relevant to the day one. I'm going to go over some math and some testing that I did, and then I'm going to talk about some build stuff, and then I'll send you on your merry way on the day one. I may or may not be streaming the day one. I have a midterm tonight. I'm not sure if my professors will let me skip it yet. I've been emailing them for the past week, and they have been not really responding, so I might not be streaming the day one. I might be setting for a machine learning midterm instead, but we'll see. Okay, regardless, let's get out of the way, and let's talk about armor. So Sealed Omkar Grasps, not super relevant, I think. They provide basically a Lumina buff, like Hazardous Propulsion, basically. But like Hazardous Propulsion, was getting overridden by Radiant when it first came out. Same thing is happening to Sealed Omkar Grasp. Also does not work in a well, for whatever reason. So, not too great. I mean, not super important of a change. Mostly a roaming exotic, to be honest. And I was hoping the buff would stack with other buffs, but it doesn't. So, not great. RDM is now primary based counter system. I talked about it in my tweet, but basically this is a no-go for endgame PvE for the most part now. I'm seeing it in PvP all the time now, so I mean there's that, but for PvE not really much of a strong option anymore for sort of rocket reloading or anything like that. Okay. In terms of abilities, the big one here, I put it first, is Consecration. Got around a 29% nerf, but absolutely is still the strongest add clear splash ability in terms of efficiency in the game. So definitely probably take Prismatic Titan into day one. We'll talk about that when we get to the build section, but Consecration hasn't really been touched enough to make it not a good option for just majors, even mini bosses, and of course your average red bar. Okay. Bull charge damage. So in my opinion, I do not think Arc Titan is necessarily worth bringing into this day one, mostly because Arc Titan has kind of questionable neutral, right? Survivability wise, it's okay. You know, amplified change makes it a little bit better, a little bit more manageable. But the actual, I don't know, add clear potential, you know, being able to survive on your own and just take care of a bunch of ads, just kind of on your lonesome doing mechanics, Arc Titan is not the best at that, I would say. So, you know, Storm's Keep is nice and everything, but I don't think it's enough. And bull charge damage and rate cap, we talked about this briefly, but there's no rate cap, it seems, per player or per target for bull charge. It's just about how quickly you can stack up that bull charge. In terms of mechanics, it's like mag based, and the actual damage of bull charge is pretty decent. It's pretty spammable, but I wouldn't say it's like an absolute necessity or like a huge game changer for most scenarios, including a day one. Okay. Geomag Chaos Reach, people are saying, I saw a tweet saying that this should be disabled or something. It's pretty crazy. DPS wise, it's not like, it's just worse significantly than like a heavy weapon or something like that. So it's maybe nice for ad clear, maybe nice for like backup DPS, but then you have to run Arc Warlock instead of like a well or a Prismatic on day one. So again, if you're, again, day one is kind of about comfort, right? So if it's in your comfort zone, you know, go for it. But just objectively speaking, from like a survivability perspective, from like an ad clear perspective, it's not going to be as good as something like a Prismatic or a well. Okay. Ionic Sentry is not very good. So, I mean, it's certainly not worth like turning your head toward Arc Warlock for really any reason. Ballistic Slam, tested it with like the height thing and everything. I'm not even going to add it to the spreadsheet. It's not worth using. It's not like a damage viable melee at all. Spectral Blades now has the same total and DPS as Silk Strike pretty much, but again, you're not bringing Starter Spectral, I think, into a day one. It's a bit silly. Tempest Strike, 52% buff, but again, not really day one relevant. Lightning Surge, okay, this is something important. I know a lot of people are used to like the Getaway Artist, kind of Bleak Watcher, Devour build that a lot of people have been using on Prismatic Warlock. In my opinion, I do think Hoyle Syntho Lightning Surge is better for a day one. Now you might be kind of confused because it's like more of a melee build, a bit more dangerous. You have the Amplified buff, Amplified DR, right? And then it's kind of like a Titan equivalent now. Well, not now, but I mean, you know, Lightning Surge and Consecration have obviously been brought closer together. And I never really liked the kind of passive lack of agency that Prismatic Warlock has on the Getaway Artist build, because you're kind of relying on your Arc Soul and your turrets to kind of reproc Devour and stuff for you, or you need to get weapon kills. Whereas the thing I like about the Lightning Surge build is that in an instant, you can instantly proc Devour and know that you can proc Devour using a powerful splash ability, right? That's kind of why Titan is good. You can instantly proc Knockout using a powerful splash melee ability if you're in a sticky situation in front of a bunch of ads, right? But again, it's about your comfort zone. But me personally, if I was playing Prismatic Warlock, I would look into Foil Syntho for sure. Okay. Handheld Supernova at 94% buff, not relevant for a day one. Okay. Next up, we have weapons. Rocket sidearms, obviously, their splash damage potential has been reduced. Overall, they got around well, I say 8% nerf, but my old rocket center value was a bit off. So I think Spider said it's probably more like 20%. So nerf significantly against bosses, but you know, it's still usable in some cases. Darcy, 24% buff. Talked about this. I don't think Darcy is really relevant for day one. Its total damage is a bit lacking, and it's not a linear this season, so it can't make use of particle. So that's out. Colony is not very good post-change. Fourth Horseman has been changed so that its first to its last shot and its burst went from 617 milliseconds to 783 milliseconds. This DPS change is like 12%. It's not that big in the grand scheme of things if you're using it like a swap rotation. But obviously, it feels a lot worse now. So, you know, I know people are complaining that the fire rate feels terrible now, but the actual DPS change is not super significant, but I don't know why they did it. It's still kind of stupid. Lord of Wolves got almost double damage per like pellet, I guess you can call it, or per shot, which is enough to make it insane, and obviously it's disabled right now. Cloud Strike and Thunderlord both got bolt charge changes, so they both got like, you know, 3 to 5% buffs. And in terms of like their DPS increases, if you're wondering how much Storm's Keep and Spark of Frequency add to the DPS of a weapon like Thunderlord, it's up to 18% from just the base Thunderlord with just bolt charge triggering normally. Okay, so that's what Storm's Keep and Frequency can do to an arc weapon. Okay, next up we have Linears. Linears, I just checked that all of them received the 10% buff. All of them did receive the 10% buff, except Euphony, which received a 6% buff. And its threadling damage was not increased, which means it's probably more like a 4% buff. But yeah, that's Euphony. Queenbreaker, the combat sites version, per shot, got a 100% buff, so double damage per shot, which is probably why you're seeing everyone talk about it, because it is, you know, Bungie didn't really say that they doubled the damage per shot, but they did. So, you know, it's a lot better now. Heavy Jails, I wanted to check if all of them got the 10% nerf, and most of them did, right? Adaptive, Rapid, Legendaries, they did. Anarchy got an 11% nerf. Compressed Waves got a 3% nerf. Parasite got a 2% buff, which I was confused about. And then Salvation's Grip and Prospector got like between 10-15% nerf, okay? None of this is like super relevant for day one. You'll see in my day one damage testing that like heavy jails are just not worth it on a day one, in my opinion. Okay, a little bit of a miscellaneous change here. Flash counter. I wanted to test it because I didn't see anyone test it after it got changed. It's kind of nice actually, right? Basically how it works is after you take a decent amount of damage, it's not just any damage. I think you need to take a decent amount of damage with your sword. It just makes like this cone of blinding in front of you that actually does damage as well. So if it came with an Eager Edge sword, I could see it being useful for just like defensive purposes, but it's not like an S tier perk or anything like that with the change. Okay, now let's get to the fun stuff. So over here, I have a spreadsheet. So basically what I spent my time last night doing is I did a very simple damage test, okay? All I did was I put on a Lunafaction Well of Radiance, 3 Surges, 3 Loaders, and no reserves. So I'm basically mimicking what you would probably have on a day one. You would have a buff, probably well, not something like Lumina or Support Auto. You would have 3 Surges from your boots, and then you would have maybe 3 Loaders. I mean, 2 Loaders, 1 Loader. That's not a huge difference if you have Luna well. And then no reserves, because you're probably running Resist on a day one, right? So this is going to be a good stress test of how much total damage a rotation can do on a day one, right? Or not even a rotation, probably just, you know, exotic heavies and stuff like that, right? And then, so what I did is, obviously, the currently Dungeons and Raids, I believe, have Arc and Strand Surge, so I had to account for that. I also have not been playing the game as much because I've been crashing so much, so I don't have Particle Reconstruction, so I had to multiply that manually afterward onto my results. So the raw data here is just including Surge and no Particle Reconstruction, and then the adjusted data down here is what I posted on Twitter. So this uses no Bell for the Glaive Melee stuff, uses Legend Incarnate for Hezen, and then it uses particle reconstruction, or like it has multiplied particle reconstruction in on these numbers for anything involving a linear or a fusion, like 1K in 1K's case. So as you can see here, let's go ahead and zoom in, right? Let's go ahead and zoom into the results. And so what does this tell us? So what you should really be looking at here is probably damage at 30 seconds and damage at 45 seconds, because these are like the common I don't know, like phase durations for dungeons. There's some dungeons where you want to go even longer than this, but basically here's a summary. Okay, Queenbreaker and Granite Overture are the standouts. They're exotic heavies. Euphony Wicked Sister obviously dumps all of your kinetic special ammo and all of your heavy ammo, and still kind of has similar damage profile to like Queenbreaker and Granite Overture. So that's why I don't really recommend Euphony Wicked Sister. You're certainly welcome to use Euphony as a backup damage option if you're out of heavy on like a final stand or like just a boss in general. But I would say Queenbreaker and Grand Overture should be your number 1 and number 2. So Queenbreaker has great DPS, excellent total damage, and this, I actually don't even have the Queenbreaker catalyst, by the way, when I was testing this. So I used Rain of Fire instead to kind of make up for it. So I think I had to reload like maybe 5 times with an Icarus Dash, whereas if you have the catalyst, you'd be manually reloading, but you'd only be reloading twice. So I hope that kind of clears things up. I don't have the catalyst, but you know, 5 Icarus Dashes is probably equal to like 2 manual reloads, something like that, right? So Queenbreaker is here, and then Grand Overture, this is with 20 pre-stacked missiles. If you don't have 20 pre-stacked missiles, this goes down by a fair amount, but I think most people, me and my testing group kind of agreed that you can probably pre-stack 20 missiles even, you know, without the immune change, just by killing ads during the encounter and like shooting mini bosses and whatever, and then you'd probably get a brick, you know, given how long a phase might be, right? So if we're talking about like total damage encounters like Puppeteer, for example, or like encounters where you have to stay mobile, you can't really hit crits, Grand Overture sounds like a good idea. And then if you can kind of stay still and kind of focus on an individual enemy and hit crits consistently, Queenbreaker is a good idea. And then I also want to shout out Winterbite. For those of you that haven't seen the Winterbite clip, just go check my Twitter. There's a clip of me using Winterbite. But basically, Winterbite's really broken right now because of an artifact mod called Nobel, which increases glaive melee damage by I think 85%. The way you want to use Winterbite though is if you're going to use it on Warlock, make sure you don't use it in your own well. I think the conversion to ability damage or something like that makes it so it doesn't work with stuff like Syntho. Okay, so if you're going to use Winterbite, have either someone else place the well or use like Song of Flame or something like that for DR, and then have one of your teammates on Banner of War if you want to. Again, this is like a super niche thing. I don't think this is going to really like affect the day 1 too much unless we get like an easily meleeable boss with like a lot of health and a really long phase. But just keep this in the back of your mind, maybe have it in your inventory. But yeah, Winterbite, if you want to use it, I guess in a day 1 scenario and you don't want to do the block canceling thing with like 1, 2, 3, just hold block and spam melees. It's almost as good. Okay, so yeah, Winterbite obviously has insane total damage because it literally does not use any ammo. And this is with, what did I mention? Yeah, okay, this is just with a Syntho class item, Allied Banner of War, Allied Well, Nobel, yeah, okay. I tested this on Wrathel and extrapolated the data past 20 seconds because Wrathel phase only lasts 20 seconds, right? Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's my like recommendations for damage stuff on day 1. Queenbreaker with Particle. Remember, you can have one of your teammates apply Particle if you do not have enough XP to have the mod, and then it will apply for everyone in the fire team. You can have Grand Overture, Winterbite with Nobel, and then a shout out here for backup damage. 4 times a Charm and Elemental Honing or Bait and Switch Praetus Revenge is a standout for legendaries in terms of total damage. So if you want a backup option, I know some people are using Anarchy Sniper. I don't have a Praetus Revenge crafted, so I wasn't really able to test it with the perfect roll. But Anarchy and Rewind Bait and Switch Supremacy wasn't particularly impressive to me, at least. I think Anarchy with 4 times a Charm, Bait and Switch Praetus Revenge on a boss where you can consistently hit crits, maybe like Puppeteer or something like that, might be interesting as well. So if you want to try that, I heard Salta Greppo was talking about that. You are free to try that, right? Anarchy and Sniper is probably usable on day 1, but the DPS was not amazing and the total damage was left things to be desired, let's just say, right? It's kind of like a Euphony heavy jail situation where you're using 2 slots of ammo and it wasn't super impressive. Okay, so that is going to be damage talked about. Now let's talk about what weapons you should bring on the day 1. Okay, I think the highlights here are mostly just void weapons, right? Ad clear, you have Repulsor, VS Velocity, Baton. A lot of people are saying you don't need destabilizing because the artifact mods this season. That's fine, up to you. I mean, in the second column you could take attrition, that's fine, right? One for all Lost Signal, just for building Transcendence if you're on Prismatic, which I think most people will be on Prismatic, so it's a good idea. Destabilizing Choir of One. This is mostly for encounters where you're not doing damage. I think Choir of One is great for bursting down mini bosses, especially if you opt for having a sword on for mechanics. Again, that's up to you, but Choir of One, if you can afford to have an exotic weapon that's not in your energy slot, it's a good idea, right? Repulsor destabilizing chronophage for Senna users. Just want to turn the Senna users' attention to a trace that is significantly better now than the other legendary traces this season because of the destabilizing change. So be aware of chronophage if you're a Senna user. You can also use shoot to loot instead of repulsor. And then finally, for ad clear encounters, you may want to consider like a destabilizing, machine gun, for example, like corrective measure or something like that, or hammerhead. Also decent options in case you want something that can just melt red bars without too much of a care. Okay, survivability wise on a day one, I do find physic no hesitation to be quite helpful in some situations where you have a vulnerable player on mechanics who needs to jump into like a bunch of mini bosses. Examples are like Puppeteer, for example. When you're dealing with the 4 clones in like Red Room, support auto was amazing during that day one. So consider that. I do think physic no hesitation is better than reciprocity adamantite. But, if you can't afford it because you need a specific slot support auto, then, go for it. And then finally, disorienting GL. I think a blinding GL is helpful in some cases as well for similar reasons. Obviously, you can't blind mini bosses, but, for majors and lower, you can certainly use a blinding GL if for whatever reason you can't kill enemies, but you can CC them for your teammates. Okay. Miscellaneous, for final stand and stuff like that, if you're generating breaks, might be a good idea to have a shoot to loot, primary, or trace in the back pocket. Pretty rare that you'll like need one of these, but might need it, so no reason to not have it in your inventory. And then if you are running out of heavy ammo and you need to swap to an exotic to do some like backup damage with, Cloud Strike and Euphony are obviously still going to be strong picks this time around. Okay. So that's it for in terms of like weapons you should bring. I mean, there's probably some exotics that I'm like forgetting, like some small things, like you could bring like Forerunner or something like that for like I don't know if there's a Tormentor. I don't know if there's going to be Tormentors, but if there's a Tormentor or something like that, you can bring that. Microcosm is obviously disabled for subjugators, but you guys know what to bring for those enemies, so not too complicated there. And then let's talk about builds. Okay. I have a day one tab in my endgame analysis spreadsheet if you want to see the exact builds that I'm kind of like recommending. But, this is, sorry, the wrong spreadsheet. Yeah. Where is it? Tiers? Yeah. So let's go ahead and take a look at the day one tab here. Pretty straightforward, though. If you're on Hunter, I do think Prismatic Hunter is the best because it has access to Tether if you want to be on Tether. So there's not really a reason to be on Void Hunter. But, for the most part, you're probably going to be on Goldie and then Stylish and Winter Shroud. And then you can choose to not be on Combination Blow and choose to be on, Snare or something instead. But I do think Prismatic Hunter, especially, with Amplified and all of the DR that it has in its kit, especially with like Surturachne, for example, that you can definitely afford to be on Combination Blow for a day one, as long as you're familiar with how to play Hunter and how to keep your stacks up, which is not particularly hard in my opinion. So yeah, I think pretty straightforward. And then obviously you can swap to Nighthawk for damage. These are like the main 2 exotics that you're probably going to be using. Titan, I think everyone knows this at this point, but Consecration was not changed enough to make it bad for a day one. Okay, so Titan's strongest build is probably in terms of like independence and raw, like just killing power. I think Knockout Consecration is still the best, and I think this setup is pretty good, right? You have Ruin, you have Glacier Nade for your Darkness Transcendence bar. You're probably going to be going from Hoyle Syntho to Cuirass. You could run Eternal if you wanted, because there's a lot of arc weapons that are relevant these days. So I would say, I didn't include it here, but Star Eater Eternal is a shout if you want to use that. So that's definitely an option. And then for Warlock, you have 2 different subclasses. You can either bring Solar, because Well is obviously still very important on a lot of day one environments, just to guarantee that you have a 25% buff for almost the entire phase with Radiant lingering after that. So you can run Speaker Sight, obviously, Cenotaph Mask, Sanguine Alchemy. Just run Cenotaph during mechanics or Speakers during mechanics, and then swap to Sanguine for damage. Pretty straightforward, pretty standard affair in terms of fragments and aspects. And then for Prismatic Warlock, I already talked about this, but I do think Hoyle Syntho Lightning Surge is better than Getaway Artist, more of an active gameplay style. A lot of the time, offense is the best defense in Destiny. Prismatic Titan has basically personified that concept. But I do think that can spread to Warlock as well. If you find that to be too dangerous, or you're not enjoying it, or it's not in your comfort zone, you can always, play Getaway Artist or whatever. And then, you can run Starred or Apotheosis if you happen to have multiple Warlocks, and for whatever reason you only need 1 well, but it might be safer to run 2 wells instead of just 1 well, 1 Prismatic, in terms of a day 1 environment for, dungeon damage phase that's particularly dangerous. So like I said, I don't think Storm's Keep is necessarily worth using on Arc. That's pretty much it. I would say we don't have a seasonal weekend this season, as far as I'm aware. So you can use a variety of options here. You can be on Prismatic Warlock and use Debuff Nade. You can be on Prismatic Hunter and switch to Snare for your damage loadout. You can use Withering Gaze. There's a couple options that you can use for debuff. You can also just have your Prismatic Hunter be on Tether, right? So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for day one. Good luck to everyone. I'm trying to think if I'm like forgetting anything. If you want to see the data yourself for the day one damage testing, it's all here. This is the timing data from DDT and everything. These are all cut off at 60 seconds, but the graph only shows until 45. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to message me on Discord, leave a comment, whatever. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, good luck to everyone. Enjoy using your Queen Breaker for the first time in probably many years. And hopefully I'll actually get to compete and stream the day one, but we'll see. Hopefully my professors respond to me. Bye for now.